Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today's project is going to be this 9-drawer mid-century dresser that I picked up from an estate sale. I actually started shopping estate sales because it seems like there is some deals to be had. I picked this one up for about $100 and it's in really good shape. I didn't have to do much repairs at all. I just wanted to give it an update. And actually for this project I'm trying something new that I haven't tried before. I guess it's called like a dipped paint look. So we'll go ahead and go over the steps how to do that, and we'll see how this project turns out in the end. Before any project starts, it's always important to take it apart just to see if there's any damage that needs to be addressed before the project actually starts. And then I like to give everything a good cleaning with a degreaser just to get all of that old dirt and grime off the dresser, clean the inside, because there's nothing worse than opening up a refinished dresser and having a bunch of dirt and dust on the inside. And another thing that I like to do is number all the drawers so that way they all go back into the same space they came out of, just so that I don't run into any fitment issues. Then I move on to sanding the top down, the part that I plan on keeping raw wood. I use 150 grit sandpaper to take that down to bare wood. And this project was a little tough to get everything down to bare wood because the finish on it was so thick that sanding was just going to take way too long. So pretty soon here I move on to using some chemical stripper so that way I can make my life a little bit easier. I always use chemical strippers as a last resort because I don't like to waste my time waiting for all of the wood to dry, because after using this the wood is pretty wet and then you have to use some mineral spirits to kind of deactivate the chemical stripper, and then you have to wait for everything to dry before you can actually sand it. So if I can scrape it or sand it without having to use a chemical stripper, I would prefer that method, but this was just going to make my life a lot easier for this portion of the project. While I give the chemical stripper some time to work, I start by removing all of the drawer handles off of the drawers so that way I can get to sanding 3 of the top drawers down to bare wood because the rest are going to be painted. After removing the plastic, I can tell that the chemical stripper worked to a certain point but didn't work on all of the areas. As I was scraping it, it was coming off as like a plastic finish, which is probably why it was so hard to sand down. So I do have to do 2 rounds of chemical stripping and scraping, and then I actually had to move on to my carbide scraper just so that I can get more of that finish off. And this finish was just very tough and it took a long time to get this down to bare wood, but I was committed to the look and I'm just going to see it through. When using a carbide scraper, you want to make sure you try to keep it really nice and flat and level because you can gouge the wood. It's one of those things that I don't really like using as well. If I can just sand, I'd prefer to just sand, but sometimes it takes way too long. And right here I'm using this mineral spirits so that I can deactivate the chemical stripper and clean it up. And this is the part where I say now it needs a bunch of time to dry so that way I can sand it. So I move on to all the drawers and just get to work. Finally, the top has had 24 hours to dry, so I jumped straight into it with 150 grit sandpaper to sand it down to bare wood. And 150 grit sandpaper usually is enough to leave it at that, but I like to go over raw wood with 220 grit sandpaper as well, just to kind of get some of those pigtail swirls out, because they do show up a lot when you use any kind of stain or whitewash or paint wash, and it looks terrible. While I was prepping all the drawers for paint, I did notice that one of the drawers did have a crack in it, and it seems that the face actually had broken an entire piece off. So since it broke off so clean, all I had to do was add some wood glue and clamp it down, and then later on I'll give it a little bit of a sanding just to even it out, and you would never even know. If you do any kind of DIY work around your house, or you do some type of furniture or anything like I do, a pin nailer is going to be such a game changer because it allows you to repair stuff to cause minimal damage, and you can cover every pinhole up with just a little bit of wood filler or even paint. As long as I've been doing furniture, I've never done a paint wash. I usually just use a whitewash stain because I'm just looking for a lighter color. But for this one, I was looking for a warmer tone that was actually going to complement the wood. And one thing that I did notice is the hard grain versus the soft grain gives the wood like a different look, like a lighter look. And this paint wash kind of takes all of that away and gives it a cohesive color. And I couldn't be happier, so I will be doing some more paint washing moving forward. One thing that I did learn about paint washing is that you want to apply it and remove it very quickly because it does dry kind of quick, especially because it's diluted with water. So if it's warm out, it could dry on you a little fast. So just wipe it on and immediately go and wipe it off. And if you're not happy, you can always do a second coat to achieve the color that you're looking for. Now that all the paint washing is done, I have to give it time to dry, so I wanted to address the legs. I don't really like how short these legs are, and it makes the dresser seem really low. I just wasn't really happy with that, so I removed those legs because I had an idea of putting either longer, straight, tapered legs, but then I did remember that I had some legs that I've had sitting around for a long time. They are tapered, solid wood. I don't believe they're vintage, but I figured that they would work great for this piece, and I decided to just give them a try. Once I decided that I was going to use these legs for this project, I had to remove the old finish, so I used my orbital sander with 150 grit sandpaper just to get them down to bare wood. And I was super happy to learn that this wood grain was very light, just like the dresser. So once I added the paint wash on it, they matched absolutely perfect, and you would never even know that these weren't a part of the dresser originally. Now that everything is dry, it's time to move on to masking off my line, and I knew exactly where I wanted to put it because it has separations for all the drawers anyway, so I decided that the first line and all the drawers on the sides above it were going to be the natural wood, and below I'm going to paint it black. Yes, I really love the color black on dressers, especially with the light wood. The contrast is perfect. I taped my line off. It's time to mask everything with masking paper because I'm going to do the paint, because the last step is going to be clear coat, finishing everything. So you want to be sure to prep all your work as best as you can, because if not, it's going to create more work for you down the line and it's going to turn into a nightmare. In order to get a crisp line, you want to use frog tape, and you want to seal the seam between the tape and the wood with some polyurethane. It just ensures that you don't get any bleed through. I did receive all of these tips from another furniture flipper who does great work. Her name is Katie Scott. She has a channel called Salvage by K Scott. She was a big inspiration for me to give this dipped look a shot, and I just want to say thank you. Now that everything's taped up and ready to go, it's time to start the paint process. So I switch out my small blanket for a big painter's tarp, so that way I don't get overspray all over my concrete floors. I lied. I thought I was ready to paint, but then I forgot that I didn't mask off any of the drawers, so I had to get some masking paper and some painter's tape so that I can mask all the drawers off, just to expose the face of the drawer so I don't get overspray all over the dresser drawers. And this part is pretty tedious and I don't look forward to it. I have noticed that some other furniture flippers like to use plastic with tape that's already combined, but this is just what I'm used to doing, and I may give the plastic with tape a shot later on in the future. The paint process is pretty typical across every project that I do. I'm using a cabinet grade paint, so that way I don't have to use a top coat and the paint dries very hard and durable. I like to mix my paint with a little bit of water just so that it moves through my HVLP spray gun a lot better. If you try to use just paint alone in an HVLP spray gun, it tends to come out very light because the paint's too thick and it can't move through the gun. So just keep that in mind if you're ever going to try to paint anything using an HVLP spray gun. Don't always show a step-by-step process of the paint because it's pretty self-explanatory, but I do like to do at least bare minimum 3 coats of paint and sanding of 400 grit sandpaper in between each coat. That just ensures that you're going to have a good bond between each coat and you're going to get a silky smooth finish. One of the good things about it being summer right now is that it's very warm outside, so the paint dries within 20 to 30 minutes and I'm able to actually get all 3 of my coats done in a single day, which saves so much time. Another thing you can use too is these Scotch-Brite pads. You don't have to use sandpaper. You really just want to create like a little bit of a rough surface while knocking down anything that may have stuck to the dresser and dried. And it works perfect, and you don't always have to use sandpaper. Another reason why I like to do 3 coats is because the first coat I always like to use it as a coat to show me any imperfections or any defects that might be in the wood. And as you can see in that last shot, the paint kind of came off because it probably wasn't sanded good enough. So I like to use that first coat to expose any issues. And now for the moment of truth to see if all of my prep paid off. And as you can see, the line is very crispy. There was no bleed through. All of the tips that I got from Katie worked perfectly. I couldn't be happier with how straight that line came out. But when you're tearing the tape, you want to make sure you pull upwards and not downwards toward the paint because you don't want to actually tear any of the paint. Now that the paint is dry, I can do a clear coat over the entire piece. I'm using a satin finish polyurethane. It is a water-based polyurethane. It's one of the only top coats that I use. And this paint doesn't require a top coat, but because I have to apply a top coat to the raw wood, I have to do the entire piece. Otherwise, it's going to leave a lot of overspray on the paint, and it's just not going to work. So I do 3 coats of this with 400 grit sanding in between each coat, and that's pretty much the standard for finishing that I like to do. I almost forgot that I had to clear coat the legs as well, so I used a piece of 2x4 with some double-sided tape to stick them down to it so that they don't fall over when I'm trying to spray them because they are tapered and they won't stand up on their own. With all of the spraying out of the way, the last thing there is to do is to remove all of the masking tape so I can get to the drawers. I bought some new pulls for them because I wasn't happy with the way that the other ones looked, and I'm a sucker for brass and black paint. It's just a very nice contrast. So I picked up these brass handles from Amazon. They do share the same hole size so that I don't have to fill the old holes and drill new ones, which creates more work. And I have to say they actually fit this piece perfectly. I move on to waxing all of the sides of the drawers just so that they are nice and fresh, smelling good, and looking good. A lot of times dressers will have a finish on the sides and on the insides of them, but these ones don't. And I had to do a lot of waxing on the inside as well just to freshen everything up. It is a lot of work, but this stuff smells so good and the customers really appreciate it because everything looks nice and new, and I would just not skip that step. Now that the entire piece has had time to dry, it's time to move on to the last step of this project, and it's to attach these new legs to the bottom. Luckily, when I removed the old legs, it did have some wood pieces there that held on the old legs, so I didn't have to attach anything in order to put these new legs on. It always gets me excited to be doing these final touches because it means that I am done with the project and all I have to do is reassemble it. So once the legs are on, I prop it back up, and I'm very, very happy with the height of this dresser. The legs elevate it just a little bit more off of the ground, and then it's time to put on all of the new brass handles, put all the drawers back into this dresser so that way I can take a step back and enjoy all of my hard work. For my first painted raw wood dipped piece, I couldn't be happier. It came out perfect. The legs really elevated this piece up off of the ground, and those drawer pulls set it off. Real quick, let's go over the numbers for this piece. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I did pick this dresser up for $100, and the only other thing that I did have to buy were the drawer pulls, which was like $30 on Amazon. I had the legs already, so those were free. Most of the material that I used, I buy in bulk, so I did invest about $150 into this piece, and I had it sold within a few days for $800 with free delivery, so that gives me a profit of $650. I really hope everybody enjoyed the process of this project, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.